Voices of the sky that sang of our creation. The sky had always been a quiet witness to the lives of Earth's children, or so we believed. But one evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, the sky began to hum. Not a wind through trees, not a whisper of clouds, but a pure, resonant voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I was sitting on the edge of the cliff above the city, watching the river snake through the valleys, when I first heard it. The hum became a melody, delicate and vast, stretching across the stars above. It felt ancient, older than memory, as if the sky itself remembered something that we had long forgotten. My name is Liora, and I have always been drawn to the sky. As a child, I would climb to rooftops, stretch out my arms, and pretend I could touch the clouds. But this night was different. The sky spoke, and in its voice, I felt a story unfold, a story of creation, of beginnings long before humans walked the earth. The melody carried shapes in its sound. I closed my eyes, and in the dark behind my eyelids, I saw vast oceans forming, mountains rising, and stars bursting into existence. I saw rivers weaving through lands that had yet to exist. I saw creatures of every form learning to breathe, to move, to sing. The sky was singing not just to me, but through me. I ran to the city square, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and awe. Others were beginning to notice. People tilted their heads upwards, and a hush fell over the crowd. Some wept, some laughed, and some whispered prayers to gods they had long stopped believing in. It was then I realized the voices of the sky were not just sounds. They were memories, memories of the universe itself, of the moments when time and space first learned to dance together. And somehow we were part of that dance. I could feel the resonance in my chest, in my bones, in the fibers of my being. I reached out to touch the air, as if it were something solid, something I could hold, and in that instant, a spark of understanding lit within me. The sky was singing of us, not just humans, but all life, all matter, all energy that had ever moved and changed. We were not separate from creation. We were its chorus, its echo, its living proof. When the voices faded, a deep silence fell. It was not emptiness. It was a quiet that held everything, stars, rivers, mountains, and life itself. And in that silence, I knew that the world had changed, even if the streets looked the same and the buildings stayed where they were. Something invisible had shifted. I spent the night walking under the stars, following the river back to my home. The memory of the voices lingered in me, a soft vibration in my chest. I knew I had to understand it, to follow the song wherever it led. The next morning, I packed a small bag. I didn't know where I was going, only that the sky had called me to listen. The voices had sung of our creation, and now they would guide me to the stories we had forgotten, the ones older than history, older than time. As I walked beyond the city limits, the familiar fields and forests seemed to shimmer in anticipation. The wind carried a faint hum, and I realized the sky had not stopped singing. It was waiting for me to catch up, to learn to hear, and eventually, to sing along. The further I walked from the city, the louder the sky became. The melody was faint at first, almost like a memory brushing against the edge of my mind, but soon it grew into a chorus that vibrated through the air and through me. Every note seemed to carry shapes, colors, and textures I could not name, as if the universe was painting itself in sound. I entered the forest at the edge of the valley. The trees were old, taller than any I had ever seen. Their leaves shimmered faintly, reflecting the sky's song in ways that made the air itself glow. Birds perched on branches, but they did not sing. They listened. I realized then that I was not the only one hearing this music. The forest was alive with attention, waiting for something to unfold. Hours passed, or perhaps it was days. I could no longer tell. Time had become fluid under the song of the sky. When I stopped to rest, I could see visions flickering in the air, great oceans forming and receding, volcanoes breathing fire into the air, creatures learning to move on land and in water. I understood, in some quiet corner of my mind, that the sky's voices were teaching me the story of all life, from its first spark to the present moment. I met others along the way. The first was an old man named Kale, who lived alone on the edge of the forest. He said he had been hearing the voices for many years. His eyes, pale and clouded with age, held the clarity of someone who had listened too closely to truths that were too vast to speak. "They sing of beginnings," he said when I told him of the night I first heard them. "But they also sing of endings. Creation and destruction are twins. You cannot know one without the other." He gave me a small crystal, warm to the touch. "This will help you hear more clearly," he said. "It does not make the voices louder, but it makes them yours. It will teach you to follow them without fear." With the crystal in my hand, the sky's song became a map. I could feel currents in the air, guiding me toward places that were not marked on any map, places older than cities, older than mountains. I followed the currents over hills and rivers, through valleys that seemed untouched by human presence. At night, I would sit under the stars and listen. The voices told me of the first fire in the universe, of atoms dancing into molecules, of stars exploding and giving birth to new ones. Sometimes I heard whispers of our own species, small and fragile at first, learning to walk, to speak, to dream. One evening, as the sky painted itself in shades of violet and gold, I came upon a lake that shimmered like liquid crystal. Its surface was perfectly still, reflecting the sky so clearly that I could not tell where water ended and air began. The song grew louder here, almost as if the lake itself was amplifying it. I knelt at the edge of the water, and for the first time, I tried to sing along. My voice was hesitant, trembling with the weight of the universe, but the lake responded. Ripples formed, patterns spreading outward like the first moments after creation itself. The sky's melody shifted, harmonizing with me, teaching me how to add my own voice to the chorus. I realized then that this journey was not only about hearing the sky, it was about joining it. The voices wanted to teach us how to remember, to become part of the story of creation rather than just witnesses. That night, under the reflection of stars and the shimmering lake, I felt a connection I had never known. Every living thing, every mountain, river, and star, every particle of dust and spark of energy was part of the same song. And I, for the first time, could hum along. But the journey was only beginning. The voices hinted at something more, something beyond the forests, beyond the lakes, beyond the reach of any human city. There were places where the song was louder, deeper, older, and I knew I had to find them. They were the heart of creation, the source from which all life and all stories had sprung. I rose with the dawn, feeling the crystal pulse in my hand, guiding me forward. The sky sang, and this time it felt urgent, like a heartbeat calling me to run faster, to climb higher, to leave behind everything familiar. I did not know what I would find, but I knew one thing clearly. The voices were not finished with me yet, and I was ready to follow them, wherever they might lead. The next morning, I left the lake behind, carrying the crystal that pulsed faintly in my palm. The forest seemed to part around me, guiding my steps toward places I could not name. The sky above shimmered with patterns that were almost alive, tracing constellations I had never seen, shapes that pulsed in time with the voices. The journey led me into mountains older than memory. Their peaks pierced the clouds, and the wind carried fragments of the song with it, high notes that seemed impossible for any human ear to reach. The mountains were silent in appearance, but I could feel their memory in the air, vibrating like the strings of an unseen instrument. One evening, I reached a plateau where the stone was smooth and black, reflecting the stars above like glass. Here, the voices changed. They no longer sang of beginnings or the dance of life. They sang of purpose, of the choices that shaped worlds. I heard echoes of civilizations rising and falling, of wars fought not just by humans, but by stars themselves, by currents of energy that shaped planets. As I walked across the plateau, I saw shapes form in the darkness, figures of light, neither solid nor ethereal, moving in patterns that told stories. They were not ghosts, nor gods, nor beings I could name. They were the memories of life itself, dancing. One approached me, and though it had no face, I felt it was speaking directly to me. You seek to understand creation, it said, not in words, but in thought, carried on the vibrations of a crystal. Yet understanding is not enough. To remember is not enough. You must carry the song forward. The voices of the sky have chosen you, Liora, to be their witness and their voice. I felt fear and awe together. Why me? I asked, my voice trembling, though I doubted it could reach such a being. You are ready, it replied. The world has forgotten how to listen. Too many have closed their ears to the voices. But you have not. You have the heart to carry the song, to let it flow through you and into the world. The plateau began to shimmer, and the sky opened in a display of light and sound unlike anything I had ever seen. Stars spiraled into colors I had no names for, and the voices grew into a crescendo that made the mountains tremble. I could see the patterns of creation, the birth of galaxies, the weaving of matter into life, the rise and fall of countless worlds. It was overwhelming, yet it felt intimate, as if the universe had unfolded just for me. And then I understood. The voices were not just history. They were instructions, lessons embedded in sound. They were telling me how to connect, how to become part of the web of life, how to carry the memory of creation in my own being. I stayed on the plateau for days, or perhaps weeks. Time seemed to stretch and fold around me. I learned to hum along with the voices, to let them guide my breath and heartbeat. The crystal became an extension of me, vibrating with the song, translating the cosmic melodies into rhythms I could feel in my body. One morning, as the first light of dawn touched the peaks, I saw a path revealed in the mountains. It was not a road, not a trail, but a line of energy pulsing faintly across the stones. The voices urged me forward. They promised that beyond this path lay a place where creation itself could be heard in its purest form. Before I left the plateau, I turned once to look at the mountains I had crossed. They were more than stone and forest. They were memory, history, and song. I understood that every step I had taken had been part of the voice's plan, preparing me to hear what few humans had ever heard. With a deep breath, I stepped onto the path of light, feeling the crystal's pulse synchronize with mine. The voices rose to a new intensity, a living river of sound that wrapped around me, lifting me forward. I did not know where I would arrive, only that the song had a destination, and I was meant to follow it. As I walked, I realized something profound. The voices of the sky did not merely tell stories, they were alive, and in listening, I too became alive in a new way. My mind, my heart, my very soul was learning to remember what had been forgotten, that all life, all matter, all energy is connected, and that our existence is a note in a symphony older than time itself. I did not walk alone. The echoes of other lives, other memories, followed me. Perhaps others had walked this path before me, and perhaps others would follow. But for now, the voices and I were one. And the sky sang. The path of light led me higher into the mountains, beyond where birds dared to fly, and where the air itself seemed thin and rarefied. Every step made the voices stronger, clearer, more insistent. They no longer merely hummed or sang. They began to speak in layers of harmony that resonated through my very being. I began to see glimpses of the source. It was not a place as I knew it, nor a thing, nor a structure. It was a convergence, a point where sound, light, energy, and memory collided in perfect unity. The closer I came, the more I felt my own life entwining with it. I could feel my thoughts dissolving into the song, yet somehow I remained conscious, aware, and whole. Along the path, I encountered others. Some were like shadows of humanity, travelers who had also followed the voices, yet unlike me, they had become still, silent, as though the song had absorbed them entirely. Their presence was peaceful, luminous, a reminder that the voices did not destroy, they transformed. A sudden wind swept across the plateau, and the voices rose into a crescendo so powerful it made my bones vibrate. Then, through the layers of sound, a single tone emerged, singular and piercing, the tone of creation itself. I fell to my knees as the energy wrapped around me. I could feel stars forming in the emptiness beyond time, galaxies spinning into existence, and countless worlds awakening with life. The voices spoke of beginnings that were also endings, of death that led to birth, of chaos that wove itself into harmony. And then I saw it, a figure of light, more vast and complex than any being I had imagined, pulsing with the rhythm of creation. Its presence was neither threatening nor comforting. It simply was. I understood instinctively that this was the source, the heart of the voices, the memory of existence itself made manifest. "You have come," the figure said, not in words, but in resonance. "Few hear us, and fewer still follow. You have listened when the world ignored the song. You have remembered when the world forgot. You are now a voice of the sky." I struggled to find words, but none were adequate. "Why me?" I whispered, though even that felt too small. "Because you chose to hear. Because you chose to follow. Because you chose to remember. Creation is not only a beginning, it is a responsibility. All who hear the song must carry it, must live as part of it, must teach others to hear as you have." The voices rose in harmony with the figure's words, and I felt them weaving into my body, into my mind, into my soul. I was learning not just to listen, but to speak, to become a living bridge between the sky and the world below. I saw visions of Earth from this height, of humanity asleep beneath the stars. And yet, I felt hope. The voices did not speak of doom or despair. They spoke of potential, of awakening, of a world remembering its place in the cosmos. My role, the figure explained, was to carry this song back, to help others hear the melody of creation and remember their connection to it. Days, or perhaps moments, passed as I stayed at the source. The sky's voices were everywhere and nowhere, and I learned to harmonize with them, to become part of the resonance. I understood the fragility of life, the vastness of time, and the infinite beauty of existence. And most importantly, I learned that the song of creation was not static. It required living beings to continue it, to breathe it into the world. Finally, I knew it was time to leave. The voices did not fade. They traveled with me, a living current flowing through every step I took. The figure of light pulsed once more, and I understood it was not goodbye. It was a promise. I would always carry the song, and it would always guide me, teach me, and grow through me. As I descended the mountains, I felt the sky differently. The wind, the clouds, the stars, they were all speaking to me now in ways I could understand. The crystal pulsed softly in my hand, a reminder of my connection to the voices and the source. I returned to the forests, the lakes, and finally to the edges of cities. People did not hear the sky as I did, but I no longer needed them to. The song was alive in me, and I knew it would ripple outward, slowly, like the first notes of a melody traveling through silence. At night, I would lie beneath the stars and hum along, and sometimes, faintly, I would hear others joining in, strangers, travelers, dreamers, each adding a note to the eternal song. The sky had sung of our creation, and I had heard. But now, it was my turn to help the world remember. I walked back into the world I had left behind, carrying the pulse of creation in my heart. The streets were the same. The rivers flowed as they always had. The forests whispered in familiar rhythms, but I was different. The sky's voices had changed me, and through me, they would change the world. At first, I tried to explain it to others. I spoke of the melodies, the visions, the voices of creation, but few could understand. Some laughed, some shook their heads, some thought me mad. But the song does not demand belief. It asks only to be heard. And those who truly listened, quietly, without expectation, felt it. A subtle vibration in their chest, a memory they did not know they had. I began to wander from town to town, city to city, sitting under the open sky, humming the melodies the voices had taught me. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, others began to join. Children first, whose ears had not yet been closed to wonder. Then dreamers, artists, scientists, and wanderers, anyone who could still hear. Each new voice added to the chorus. Together, we sang of the birth of stars, the first rivers, the mountains and oceans, and the endless dance of life. And as we sang, the world itself seemed to respond. Flowers bloomed with richer colors. Rivers sparkled in new ways. Even the wind seemed to carry harmonies that had never existed before. Some nights, I climbed the cliffs above the river, where I had first heard the sky. There, I could see the patterns of the voices stretching across the heavens, tracing our histories, our connections, and our future possibilities. It was a reminder that the song was infinite, eternal, and yet fragile, dependent on those who remembered it. And I realized something profound. The voices of the sky had not only sung of our creation, they had sung for our awakening. We were not separate from the universe. We were part of its music. Every thought, every dream, every act of kindness or creativity added a note to the symphony. The world began to change, quietly but deeply. People learned to listen again, not just to the sky, but to one another. Old conflicts softened, misunderstandings faded, and empathy grew like roots through the soil of human hearts. The song of creation was teaching us to remember who we were, what we had forgotten. That life itself is a miracle, and every being a note in a grand, eternal chorus. Years passed, and I grew older, yet the song never left me. I passed the crystal on to those who were ready, guiding them to hear and to remember. And under every sunrise and every starlit night, the voices of the sky continued to sing, as they always had. And sometimes, when the wind brushed my face just right, I could hear the first melody again, the one that had called me to climb the rooftops as a child, the one that had guided me to mountains, lakes, and the heart of creation. And I would hum along, feeling every note, every vibration, every connection. The sky had sung of our creation, and we had remembered. And as long as there were hearts willing to listen, the voices would continue. We had become the song.